Hello, I'm Rich Herring. I never listen to Nerdology because I am way too cool. But carry on listening, nerds.
Hi, this is Mark, and you're listening to episode 7 of Nerdology. I'm really pleased to be joined today by Matt Barber from mattbarber.co.uk. It's a really fantastic blog. If you haven't read it yet, get on your interwebs now and start reading while you're listening to this. Hi, Matt.
Hello, hi.
Did I big you up enough there?
Yes, yeah. Although it just occurred to me that my blog's actually, this is mattbarber.co.uk.
Oh.
No explanation. But, I plugged it. So this is mattbarber.co.uk.
Make a note of that, guys.
Yes.
Right, so we thought it would be fun to have a bit of a chat about Doctor Who, because we're both quite big Doctor Who fans. I've kind of touched on it briefly in passing on episode 1 with JR, because we were talking about his book, but we didn't really focus on the programme as such that much. So we figured an interesting season to talk about would be season 7, which was Jon Pertwee's first series as the Doctor, and it was quite a groundbreaking series in many ways, and quite a departure.
It's a kind of a weird standalone kind of, almost it's a reboot, but also a dead end in Doctor Who history, I think.
So prior to season 7, we had the end of Patrick Troughton's time on the show.
Yeah.
I think was it Derek Sherwin was the showrunner at that point?
Derek Sherwin was the producer. They kind of chopped and changed producers in that period. So season 6 from 1969 was kind of Doctor Who in crisis. The scripts were chaotic, more chaotic than normal, I think, with scripts being cancelled, scripts being rewritten. They also had a lead actor who wanted out and was getting tired of the role.
They had a really punishing schedule.
They had a very punishing schedule because at that time they were still recording in sequence. And
if you read Michael Troughton's book about his dad,
I haven't yet.
It's well worth a read. No. It opens up Patrick Troughton's sort of private life.
Sure.
And he had kind of more than one family on the go.
Yeah, he was juggling 2 families.
Yeah, and that, I think, put an awful lot of pressure on him. And I think he kind of stayed with Doctor Who longer than perhaps he would have done just because he needed financial stability.
Yeah.
But I think by the end, he just got to the point where he just couldn't stick the work rate for much longer.
So at that time, 3 years doesn't sound very long nowadays, but at that time, 3 years would have been the equivalent of I don't know, Sylvester McCoy going for about 10 seasons or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it all but killed William Hartnell, the schedule. And he had to get wheeled out of the role. And again, Patrick Troughton, I think it was partly he was getting tired, but also partly he was getting frustrated with late scripts coming in. So,
yeah, I think he felt, from what I've read, that the standard had slipped. Season 5, I think he quite enjoyed, but season 6 had really taken quite a drop.
Yes, yeah, I can sympathise with him, to be honest. Season 6 has its highlights, but it also has its low points, I think. I think there's a resurgence of War Games.
Yeah.
When I watched it originally, I thought it was overlong, and it was meandering.
It is a long story.
It is a long story. But I watched it again this year on the recently released DVD.
Yeah.
I thought it was really good. And I don't know whether I've been convinced by positive. Everything in Doctor Who magazine at the moment is positive, so everything's great. So there's been a sort of wasn't the War Games fantastic? And I can't remember it being fantastic, and I watched it again.
I remember reading the Target novel as a kid and really liking it.
Yeah.
And I didn't see it, the actual TV version, for a long time.
No.
And I'm down on record as not being a huge fan of the Pertwee period of the show.
Right.
And one of my real problems is the amount of 6 and 7 parters.
Yes.
And this is it 10 parts?
It's 10 parts.
Yeah. I mean, that's long, but for me, I probably wouldn't sit and watch it in a whole sitting, but it's a good story.
I might be wrong. but I think it came about because of a collapse of a 4-parter and a 6-parter.
That's right.
And virtually Terence Dicks and Malcolm Hulke sat down and wrote an episode a week.
Yeah.
And kind of did it like that. So I mean, I think it was lying in a rubbish tip, surrounded by barbed wire and explosions.
Yeah.
In a script that he hadn't really had a chance to practice in the cold and the wet.
Yeah.
I think it's not surprising that Patrick Troughton decided against coming back.
Yeah, it didn't sound like the most fun shooting experience.
No, and of course with Patrick Troughton, it was natural to eject the 2 companions, Zoe and Jamie as well.
Yeah.
Jamie had been a really long-running companion for 2.5 seasons, or the best part of 3 seasons.
That trio are quite fondly remembered, aren't they?
That trio, yeah. Well, particularly Jamie and the Doctor, I think, had become a very close knit.
Yeah, a real double act.
And then Zoe for that season and Victoria for the previous season had kind of offset that. And Zoe was quite a good character. I mean, in many ways, she was a very modern companion.
Yeah.
She was an expert. But in traditional 1960s mode, she was an expert that was only an expert at certain points of the story. So she was an expert when they needed her to be an expert.
Yes, exactly.
And then she was a little bit
The bit in The Invasion where she talks the computer into blowing up, that sort of thing.
Yes, yeah. I mean, if you're a computer scientist, I'd imagine that's a little bit unrealistic. If you're an 8-year-old child, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Although, conversely, Jamie is supposed to be effectively an idiot, but an understandable idiot because he comes from 16th, 17th century, 18th century,
the Battle of Culloden or whatever it was.
1740s. But gradually, as a series, they kind of forget this for a moment.
That's right.
So he becomes quite technical. And again, in The Invasion, he's sort of fiddling with the radio, and so the characters were sort of malleable. So they ejected these 2 characters. Or they invited them to leave with Patrick Troughton.
So it was a complete clean sweep for the start of next season.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just a clean sweep on that. Obviously, there's huge changes within the BBC.
Sure.
I think, was it the previous year they started broadcasting in colour? In a very limited way.
Yeah, I think it was from 1967 onwards they were experimenting.
I think even in 70, when this series went out, I think the amount of people you could pick up colour, let alone have a colour set, was relatively small.
Yeah. Most people would have seen season 7 in black and white.
Yeah.
Probably quite happily.
Yeah.
Just watching it in black and white. So it wouldn't have been until probably season 9 or 10 when the colour bandwagon. I think once the sales of colour television started, then they escalated.
Yeah.
He says with no authority on the subject at all.
I go along with that.
I'm just talking. Yeah, I say things and they sound convincing. That's how I get through life. So most people would have seen season 7 in black and white, but the change from black and white to colour, it didn't just affect how people watched the series. It affected how people made the series. Yeah. Suddenly, you could use colour separation overlay. Yeah. Which
Barry Letts was a huge fan of that.
He was a huge fan to the point where he colour separation overlaid a kitchen in Terror of the Autons unconvincingly.
Yeah.
He took his experiments quite far. They were groundbreaking experiments, and he was really at the forefront of this technology that ITV was using as well.
Yeah.
And there was a kind of a cold war between the BBC and the ITV because they didn't share the technology. So they were gradually sort of trying to outdo one another.
Yeah.
And Doctor Who was obviously at the forefront of this
well, it's a
battle.
perfect test bed, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's Doctor Who and the weather forecast, the news.
Yeah, Michael Fish didn't really have the same sort of dramatic presence.
No, and actually, the weather forecast at the time would be stick-on things. That's nostalgia. So Doctor Who was the sort of the kind of the cauldron for this, to mix the metaphor, for this battle to go on with colour separation overlay. But also it changed the way introduction of colour changed the way that the things were framed and things were depicted. The choice of aliens, the choice of monsters.
I think in the 60s they were able to perhaps mask some of the, I dare I say, cheapness of the sets,
Sure,
because of
yeah.
the lighting and because of the fact that there's less lines in the picture, that you
Sure.
could get away with that, whereas
Yeah,
in colour
yeah.
it was there to see, wasn't it?
And the difference between VT and film
Yeah,
is
was
much less
markedly different.
much less noticeable in. So something like The Invasion, which is the closest relative,
Yeah.
is the kind of the audition piece for season 7.
Mm.
The Invasion looks really good.
Yeah.
I mean, you've still got interiors done on VT, exteriors done on film.
Yeah.
But going from one to the other, you can still tell the difference, but it's not as jarring.
Mm.
Whereas most of season 7, actually season 7 doesn't seem to have. I mean, the Inferno is quite jarring when they go from inside to outside.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the first story, Spearhead from Space,
yes,
that's all on film.
Famously, it's all on film,
And it looks fantastic.
It looks fantastic.
It does.
But that emphasises the kind of reboot quality of the series.
Wasn't it something to do with a strike or something?
There's
they
a
had
strike
to do,
strike at the BBC, so the knock-on effect being they didn't have any studio space, so somebody had the bright idea of doing it all on film, which is actually, I might be wrong, but is actually a slightly cheaper way of doing it.
Yeah.
But obviously at that time the BBC was heavily unionised, so there's a constant sort of negotiation going on between
real balancing act.
between you're not actually making a series for the viewers, you're making a series for the people who work at the BBC. That sounds very right wing, but that's kind of what was happening at the time.
Yeah.
So someone had the bright idea. I think it was the director. And the director was Derek Martinus. Maybe it was the producer of making the story at the BBC Training Centre, Wood Norton, and doing it all on film, interiors and exteriors, and it worked really well. I mean, it makes the story really distinctive.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the plot in isolation. It's actually quite a chaotic plot.
Yeah.
It's got lots of disparate elements, and it's probably not Robert Holmes's finest story.
There's lots of memorable moments, but it's not necessarily going to stand up as the best story.
No, there's lots of memorable, visual moments. But if you think about the end, I mean, the end is basically a big model octopus causing Jon Pertwee to gurn.
Oh God, that.
Which looks about, you don't want to show. It's one of the bits you don't want to show somebody who doesn't know Doctor Who.
No.
But when you're a Doctor Who fan watching it, you're kind of cheering it on because it's suddenly Jon Pertwee forgets that he's developing this serious new sort of acting style.
Breaks away from the hard man role,
and then he just thinks, how will he's doing a method actor thing? How will the Doctor react in this? I think the Doctor would gurn in this situation. So there are bits which you wouldn't, but there are also really, really powerful bits. I love the Auton design.
Yeah.
I love the Auton design more than I like the Auton design in Terror of the Autons.
Yeah.
I thought they'd kind of lost it a bit then, which always confuses me. I can't see how you can make one story where they look fantastic, and then a later story. It's the same with the Sontarans. He says skipping forward. Fantastic in The Time Warrior, and then you get the Sontaran Experiment where they just look shoddy. Then
you got the Invasion of Time
where they look completely awful, and then you got the Two Doctors where they look atrocious, and you have to wait until the Sontaran Stratagem before you actually get a Sontaran that looks as good. But I still don't understand. I suppose they're reusing the masks with the Sontarans, so you get Kevin Lindsay,
maybe.
But then it's Kevin Lindsay. It's the same actor in the Sontaran Experiment. It's just madness.
I think back then, on the other podcast that I do, that's the Blue Box podcast.
The Rival podcast.
The other one, the one we don't mention on here. I think somebody mentioned that in terms of continuity, particularly when you had a change in the sort of the people who were making the show, you didn't have quite so much in the way of videotapes to just go back and look at what they'd done before. So it meant having to book a screening room, get a roll of film out from the library, arrange a viewing and what have you, and perhaps they didn't always have time to do that. Maybe, I don't know. Possibly.
I mean, there's also an economic thing that we forget, that sometimes that Doctor Who exists alongside the economy of 1970s Britain. And the economy in 1970s Britain resembles a ride at Thorpe Park. Sometimes you get real highs, but then you get crushing lows. So.
You're thinking of Underworld by any chance?
We're drifting off topic, but I'm thinking of Graham Williams. People blame Graham Williams for introducing sort of comedy and for not quite matching the quality of Philip Hinchcliffe, but they forget that Philip Hinchcliffe virtually bankrupt Doctor Who. With
Talons of Budget on his season.
That was his last story, so he just threw everything at it.
I think he used most of the budget on Hay, didn't he, to cover up that Porsche?
Absolutely. Good knowledge.
I'm just sad I read all the info text as I watch the programme.
No, I should start reading. I read an article about that in the magazine, and it does sound better than I thought it was. That's off topic. Back onto topic. So we forget that actually in that period of the 1970s, the budget was effectively sinking. It was staying the same, but it was effectively sinking because the economy inflation was going
crazy
through the roof. And I'm not an expert on what was happening in the economy in the 1960s, but I'd imagine it's the same sort of instability between recession, depression.
I think that had a huge influence on the idea to make him trapped on Earth.
Yes, yeah. So back with season 7, the economy was definitely shaped the season partially by confining him to Earth, but also the change in episode structure. So with Troughton and Hartnell, you had a large number of stories per year. And that's much more expensive than a small number of stories per year. So with season 7 you had 4 stories, but 3 of them were 7 episodes long, which hadn't been done before. The reason that's more economical is you can build sets and use them for 7 episodes.
Yes, rather than
bin them after 2. Effectively, and if you look at them in those 3 stories, so we're talking about Doctor Who and the Silurians, Ambassadors of Death and Inferno, you have several key sets. So you normally have a big central laboratory, or a war room, or a mission control, or the drill head in Inferno, and you just reuse them in different angles or scenarios. And that saves money for location footage, which I think there must have been more location footage in season 7 than there had been. There had been before. So it was definitely saving money on it. And you also got a new cast of actors. Who would be presumably cheaper. I don't know what Pertwee's salary was compared to Troughton's at the end.
I don't know.
But you assume that an actor's salary goes up every year that they're in a leading part. So David Tennant, you'd assume his salary would have increased quite significantly because he became the part. So with Jon Pertwee presumably would be cheaper than Patrick Troughton when he starts.
There's quite a different dynamic in that season as well, because before you'd had the sort of travelling companions, whereas now, because he's stranded on Earth, he ends up rather, I think, quite unwillingly under the auspices of UNIT. And he's assigned an assistant rather than necessarily someone he chooses to take on his travels with him.
And this is really, for years, we called the people that travelled with the Doctor who hang around the Doctor either companions or assistants. And I think this is the point when it became an assistant for certainly 2, maybe 3 companions. So Liz Shaw is brought in as companion by UNIT, and in fact the story was very much geared up, particularly, so we're talking about Spearhead from Space now. Pertwee isn't in the story for a long time. No. I mean, he's unconscious. As an opening story for a new Doctor, he's kind of conspicuous by his absence. And the story really starts properly with Liz Shaw arriving at UNIT, and UNIT sort of recruiting her.
It's almost like they're trying to sort of set the scene for UNIT, aren't they? And they're building up those characters. So they're basically constructing a world which the Doctor can inhabit for the next season. So it's rebooting it, but and again, I mean, this kind of is a bit that, I mean, I really love Spearhead from Space, but if you start analysing it, it kind of starts to fall apart. That you're introducing Doctor Who
the character of the Doctor and the concept of Doctor Who from a completely different aspect, which could be interesting or it could be detrimental. And if you're defending the series, you'd say it was interesting. But yeah, it's an odd way of doing it. I think it's not. It doesn't follow the rules of hitting the ground running. So something like Power of the Daleks, which is Troughton's first story.
Yeah, sadly lost.
Sadly lost, but available on audio.
Yes.
Troughton's very much. I mean, he's not quite the Doctor in it, but he's very much the central character.
Yeah. The Daleks are great in that.
The Daleks are great, but it's a relationship between the Daleks and the Doctor. So the story, that story relies on, from what I've listened to it a couple of times, so I'm no way an expert. From what I remember is the story relies on the viewer knowing what the Daleks are like, the Doctor knowing what the Daleks are like, everybody else thinking the Daleks are
something they're not.
Your this humanity's servant.
Yeah.
And that's it's a kind of a really creepy concept. It's what they repeated for Victory of the Daleks.
Even with the old would you like a cup of tea line?
Yeah, would you like, or I am your soldier, the Daleks say, which is Mark Gatiss paying homage to
paying homage,
to that line, as the David Whittaker line. So the Doctor is the centre of that, and again, Robots, which is Tom Baker's first story, the Doctor's central to that. The Twin Dilemma.
Ooh, sharp intake of breath there.
The Twin Dilemma is difficult to watch, but the Doctor's still central. Again, the Doctor isn't Doctor. The Doctor's never the Doctor in his first story.
No, there's always that kind of...
Apart even Hartnell, who you'd expect to be the Doctor in his first story. And
they're finding their way, aren't they?
They're finding his way. He's threatening to kill... He almost murders somebody in An Unearthly Child or 10,000 BC or
whatever you want to call it.
Tribe of Gum. Cave of Skulls. He's almost murdering someone, and it takes him a few stories to get to the kind of the nice, friendly Doctor.
Well, as friendly as he gets.
Yeah. But so Spearhead from Space is almost wanting to create a series set around a paramilitary organisation on Earth that investigates the unknown. So it's almost somebody wanting to invent the X-Files before the X-Files, or Doomwatch before Doomwatch starts. When does Doomwatch start? It's around that time.
It's a similar time, isn't it?
It's a similar time.
Because they're not afraid of borrowing, in inverted commas, from other established movies and
absolutely
what have you, literature.
Which is a big thing for season 7. But Doctor Who comes second, is a sort of secondary element to it.
Yeah.
The Doctor becomes a kind of a weird addition to a story about an independent agency investigating aliens. And actually season 7, one thing I do like about season 7 is it's the story of how it becomes Doctor Who again.
Yeah.
It's the story about how the Doctor becomes the central figure again. So by Inferno, you have a story where the paramilitary organisation is basically subverted in this kind of parallel dimension, this sort of fascist universe. And the Doctor's the only stable point. So the Doctor, in fact, becomes a time traveller again by the end of it. Yeah. But he's travelling sideways in time to new worlds. And suddenly, Inferno, which has hit a sort of resurgence. I mean, it's suddenly become the most amazing story of the early 1970s. And I really like it.
Yeah.
Suddenly the Doctor becomes the Doctor again.
Yes.
And is almost ready to go off on whatever Barry Letts chooses.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a degree of Barry Letts finally getting his hand on the reins towards the end of that season. I think he's starting to shape it into the programme he wants it to be the following year. Absolutely,
yeah, I think so. It's still relying on previous people's stories, I think. But Barry Letts, certainly with the Inferno, he directs half of it because Douglas Canfield doesn't have a heart attack, but he has a heart problem halfway through, collapses in the studio, gets casted off to hospital, and Barry Letts, who just happens to be... Barry Letts basically wants to direct every story that Barry Letts produces. He's obsessed with the idea of directing. He loves directing. So Barry Letts happily steps in, not happily obviously, it's very sad
Yeah.
that he had to step in, but he happily steps in and directs the end of the stories. But he's still using he's still trying to match Douglas Camfield's direction in the first episode, so it has to be consistent. And he's still using the same sets and the same script.
Yeah.
So it definitely changes for season 8. There's definitely a tonal difference and a difference in sort of types of plot. And also season 8, we talk about Pertwee being Earthbound, but actually it doesn't take long for Pertwee to go off.
No.
In, I think it's Colony in Space. He goes off, and the Time Lords start using the Doctor as a sort of a yo-yo, sort of projecting him into sort of crisis situations on other planets, and they do this regularly throughout. I mean, the Peladon stories.
Yeah.
Well, obviously by the 3 Doctors, the Earthbound idea is kind of over. The Doctor's free to go wandering, and at that point, the Pertwee stories start showing their flaws, because Pertwee's Doctor becomes a character that wants to spend time on Earth. He's not forced to spend time on Earth. He chooses to spend time on Earth, and that's when he becomes this sort of clubbable, sort of, I'm mates with people on Earth. They need me here. I've got a home here. I've got
part
a lab
of the establishment.
Here. No reason to do that. So it has to be Tom Baker. Completely, he has to regenerate.
Yeah.
And then Tom Baker has to abandon his family on home.
And they always tend to go for a totally different take on the character, don't they? Just cast someone who's just a total change of pace and direction from the previous person.
From Tom Baker. Yeah, absolutely. And it almost comes across as cruel. I always think the end of Robot and the speech in I think it's Pyramids of Mars, where he says he's got better things to do than run after the Brigadier all the time. So they're actually abandoning the unit stories, but they don't give the unit crew a big final send off.
No.
They kind of, it's obviously Philip Hinchcliffe doesn't like the idea of unit, and they kind of,
they're just going to go out with a whimper rather than a bang.
Murder it slowly. They kind of gas it to death with a number of sort of uninspired stories. I mean,
you got Terror of the Zygons.
Terror of the Zygons I like. It's very good. Android Invasion as a unit story is really depressing. I mean, it's got good bits in it, but as a unit story, it doesn't have to work. It doesn't have the Brigadier in it.
No.
It's got Benton, but it's got evil Benton, and it's got Harry Sullivan. And the worst person served by it is Harry Sullivan, who's this amazing companion. Yeah. Really kind of friendly, and he's just sort of forgot about at the end, and that's his last story.
Yeah, and Tom's first season's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
His first season's brilliant, and it's because they basically completely cut out unit, which was cruel, I think, and it seemed cruel, but completely necessary, because the Doctor has to be a time traveller. He can't have a home, and this is something Russell T Davies recognised, although ironically he set most of his first season on Earth in a sort of domestic setting, but he recognised that the Doctor can't be domestic.
No,
Christopher Eccleston's Doctor,
he's got to,
is petrified about being tied in with these domestic situations. And David Tennant's Doctor virtually dies because he becomes tied in into these domestic situations. He becomes obsessed with Earthwomen and Bernard Cribbins to the point where he just can't stop himself travelling. And I think Maximus is probably rediscovered this kind of slight cruelty. He thinks nothing of leaving the ponds to live their life. I mean, that abandonment, that's the way he leaves them. You almost didn't think that was the last pond. That didn't feel like a companion leaving story, even though they keep coming back. But that was kind of, had that sort of sense of cruelty, necessary cruelty that the 74
cruel to
season
be kind.
had. 75 season, 74, the season whatever it was, 11, 12. Anyway, moving on. So season 7, but season 7 was probably the only true Earthbound season. Yeah. And famously, Terence Dix, the script editor, was faced with a big challenge because Malcolm Hulke had told him that had warned him that he was going to be limited to storylines. Yeah. And I think the main storylines were Mad Professor, friends take over the Earth, aliens invade.
Yeah.
And
Threat from within.
Threat from within.
Yeah.
And so that season has to find new ways of telling Earthbound stories without relying on, because effectively alien invasions had been done to death in Troughton. I mean, Troughton had made an art form out of what I suspect only fans would call base under siege stories.
I do.
I do, and I really love season 5. I think season 5 is fantastic. I think it's fantastic, but probably would be less fantastic if we could see it all.
Yeah, I think there's a certain degree of it builds up the legend of the stories and the fact that we can't see them.
Absolutely, yeah. And the bits of, let's talk about season 5 a bit. The bits of the Ice Warriors that I've seen, I haven't been inspired by. Tomb of the Cybermen, I loved when it came out.
Yeah.
I went off it a bit, and now I love it again.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it will come and go. And I think the same is happening. It's amazing how stories come out in and out of fashion in fandom.
It's like music. I don't know if you're the same, but I'll be into a particular artist and you'll listen to a particular album and just keep playing it and playing it and playing it and playing it, and then you just get sick of it.
Yeah.
And then you come back to it later and you get a new appreciation for it again.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And also it connects with a certain point in your life as well.
Yeah.
So you listen to it when you're 12 or 13.
Yeah.
Then you come back to it when you're 20 and suddenly it reminds you of being 12 or 13.
Yeah.
And you get, so any sort of text, any kind of cultural artefact develops this kind of sheen of a particular period for you personally, I think.
Certainly for my age group, I'm sort of late 30s, so there is a very big nostalgia factor in looking back at these stories.
You see, you're when were you born? 1973. 73. You're actually quite lucky. Lucky. There's a kind of a, is this, I don't know if it's an unspoken rule, but somebody said sometime that your best period of time for watching Doctor Who is when you're 8.
Yeah.
And so you were 8 in 1980?
Yeah, so, 80, 81, yeah.
I was 8 in 1985. I was born in 1977. I was 8 in 1985. 1985, it's fine, but it's probably one of the worst times to be 8 and love Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Because we've got the great hiatus around that time. We've got Trial of the Time Lord.
Yeah.
Which isn't. I'm sure there are defenders of Trial of the Time Lord out there.
I like bits of it.
I like individual episodes. It's got a fantastic special effects shot at the beginning.
Oh, that is stunning.
Which would hold up today. It's almost better than some of the special effects today.
There's a sense of scale in that you don't get with CG.
I remember watching it. I remember watching Roland Rat, waiting for this to be on. And I remember watching that. And
that dates it.
And I remember thinking it was amazing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it then collapses slightly with Robert Holmes's final few stories, which are kind of still working bits.
Yeah.
And Mysterious, let's talk about Trial of the Time Lord a bit.
Yeah.
Mysterious Planet works in bits and looks quite nice.
Again, you've got the locations.
You've got the locations, but in narrative terms, you've got a story where you're constantly going back to this slightly uninspired trial room.
Yeah.
And kind of interrupting the drive of the story.
You can imagine for a casual viewer coming in, it would be not the most sort of compelling.
Absolutely, yeah. It would be confusing, and also it would constantly. I mean, the Doctor Who stories rely on constant movement forward. Yeah. You have to try and cut out the. I mean, some rely on padding. Mm-hmm.
Back to Pertwee again.
No, I'm thinking in my head. I'm thinking of a giant clam and Genesis for Daleks.
Oh well, yeah. Say no more.
and the fact that Genesis for Daleks being this amazing, miraculous, greatest story ever told, but so much of it relies on the set of characters running from one dome to another through a wasteland. Yeah. And then it's almost like they run to one dome and they've forgotten their keys in the other dome. They run back, step in a giant clam, get through a secret door. And they sort of make it, but it's still regarded as fantastic. But actually, it's regarded as fantastic by a generation of fans that grew up listening to the audio version, which cuts out a huge amount of this running back and forth. It's still great, but Pertwee had padding, but actually, the padding in Pertwee is mostly the stunt team called Havoc.
I'm thinking of Planet of Spiders.
Doing somersaults.
Isn't there an entire episode with a chase?
Yes, there is a whole chase. That's more self-indulgence than planning. That's Pertwee saying, Barry, I'm leaving in a few episodes. Do you think I could have a go at a hovercraft?
Yeah, Terence is saying, Barry, if we give him a hovercraft, maybe he'll go.
Yeah. Maybe he won't back. But yeah, that was padding. Yeah, but it was funny. It had a tramp. It had a hovercraft.
Oh yeah, they love the tramps in Pertwee era, don't they?
They love the tramps.
Yeah, yokel types.
Yeah, Claws of Axos.
Yeah,
Pigbin Josh.
Yes.
And Sam Seeley as well in Spearhead, getting back to season 7.
Yeah.
But there was padding there. But I think Trial of a Time Lord, it was just padding unnecessary sort of referrals back to this trial room. I've never been a fan of Mind Warp. I can't get into Philip Martin's. I know that they're huge fans of Vengeance and Varos and Time Warp.
Yeah.
Mind Warp, sorry. But I just can't quite see it.
I think watching it as a kid, Perry's exit was very
traumatic.
Yeah, it was a real slap in the face. Wow.
Yeah.
And then when they kind of
readdress
it at the end, it's almost like it cheapens it a bit.
Yeah, they do it in a sort of a pink heart shape,
very
thing,
1980s.
which is completely unnecessary. I blame Pip and Jane Baker. Yeah. Speaking of which, then Terror of the Ververs, I loved when I was a child. Yeah. I thought it was, and actually it's probably the strongest story.
I think it stands up well story-wise compared to the others.
I think it's the strongest story. And actually, the Vervoids notoriously look a little bit like a lady's naughty bits.
Yeah, you could say that.
But as a child, the spikes through the hands really freaked me out when I was whatever age I was, 9, 10. Really freaked me out. And I was freaked out as well by An Unearthly Foe. Not An Unearthly Foe, The Ultimate Foe.
The Ultimate Foe, yeah, that's right.
It's, episodes 13 and 14, which you probably should call it. So that's that season, but it wasn't. I think the concept of the season was flawed. The season wasn't planned. If you're going to do a season with an umbrella narrative like that, you have to.
Wasn't it all cobbled together at the last minute because they had a series already primed to go, and then
they had a series. It went on hiatus, which gave them lots of time to plan the Trial of the Time Lord. So they came up with the idea quite early, but they had sort of stillborn concepts. And then there was the great Eric Sayward, John Nathan Turner rift, where Eric Sayward actually had the grand plan for the end, written with Robert Holmes. So they bookended the series, and it almost became like modern Doctor Who. Eric Sayward had almost sort of done a Russell T Davies on it,
a story arc,
and constructed a massive story arc. And then Robert Holmes died. Eric Sayward fell out catastrophically with.
Threw his toys out the pram.
With John Nathan Turner, he didn't like Bonnie Langford coming in.
I don't think he was alone in that, to be fair.
No, Bonnie Langford, not a bad actress.
I think she's a good actress, but
completely ill-conceived character, introduced in a really bad way, and not the most likeable character. A brash character with a brash doctor. Yeah, and you'll just end up with an overdose of brashness.
Well, that's the 80s all over, isn't it?
And that's the 80s all over, yeah. So Eric Sayward left, and he took with him the conclusion. Yeah. So Pip and Jane Baker, the Wonder Team, were brought in. I'm sure they're very nice people. Yes. I guess I liked What on Earth as a sort of a... I watched What on Earth, the children's television series they did, and I was thinking it's at that period where you watch things like Bugs, Crime Traveller, Strange, What on Earth. You watch all of these things and you're thinking, they could be making Doctor Who.
Why don't they make Doctor Who?
This is quite good. Why aren't they making Doctor Who? For the same money. Why are they making Bugs when they could be making Doctor Who? This is alright. So Pip and Jane Baker came along and wrote the final episode based on, loose strands. And it kind of, they don't do a bad job. Actually, they bring back the Master. Yeah. It's not a bad story. But you're not I'm not going to be talked around. It's still just not too bad.
It's
considering
flawed. It's flawed.
It's massively flawed. Season 7, however, I'm a big fan of I think I'm a big fan of season 7, and one of the reasons I'm a big fan is it seems to be more consistent than any other season before, which is kind of unfair, possibly, but bear with me, because there's only 4 stories.
Yeah.
It can get monotonous. There is a risk. There is an argument that it could be monotonous.
Yeah.
It could be the same lab revolving the cyclotron room. Everything's happening around the cyclotron room. But they kind of, with those 7-part stories, I think they cracked it slightly by introducing 2. Each story has 2 plots. Yeah. So you have the plague plot and the Silurian plot in the Silurians. Yeah. Both of which are really fantastic. Yeah. I think the Silurians, I've got a soft spot for the Silurians. I shouldn't like it because it is virtually sort of padding incarnate. It is kind of padding, but for some reason I can watch it. I sort of measure stories by, if I'm watching a story and I start getting distracted, I start tweeting, or I want to stop it and come back to it, then it's not so good. Mm-hmm. But the Silurians I can watch all the way through without a break. Inferno I can do the same. So Inferno, you have the drill Primords story, and you've got the Fascist Earth story, and they kind of bring them together. Yes. It's slightly flawed, but it works. Ambassadors of Death, you can probably tell me if there are two plots, because you've seen it.
I only watched it very recently. Yes. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
As a Pertwee skeptic, I found it a really enjoyable story to watch.
And it's considered, depending on who you talk to, it's either the strongest story. Terrence Dicks thinks it's the strongest story of the season. Everybody else thinks it's the weakest story.
It really divides opinion. There's no one who's kind of ambivalent about it. It's a real Marmite story. Yeah.
I'm slightly ambivalent about it. I don't think it's the strongest story of the season. Yeah. But actually, I think it stands up pretty well. It stands up pretty well, and it's consistent as well. It
does borrow quite heavily from Quatermass.
Well, look, you've mentioned the Q word, so let's talk about the Quatermass, because the whole of season 7 borrows. Spearhead from Space starts virtually with a remount of the shot of, I think it's Quatermass 2, or even Quatermass 1. Actually, the first TV version of it has this opens with this kind of radar control room, watching things come to Earth, and it has. And I've watched it quite recently, the surviving episodes of the Quatermass Experiment. Yeah. And I think it's the Quatermass Experiment and not Quatermass 2. And it has almost the same, from memory, this is almost the same kind of slightly sweaty controller. Yeah. So they can't be, can they? Yeah. It's landing. How can that happen? And then the concept of Spearhead from Space is Quatermass 2. So it's meteorites from Earth take over factories. So you get factories on Earth, sinister factories on Earth. Yeah. Sort of taking over key people. Yeah. You get committee meetings with people controlled by aliens.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers kind of stuff.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And that's Spearhead. Then you've got Silurians, almost has elements of Quatermass and the Pit in it. So ancient buried alien evil, people going mad. Yeah. So the whole idea about people scrawling on the walls, and people regressing to a kind of a primal state. Yeah. That is Quatermass and the Pit. Yeah. Ambassadors of Death is the Quatermass Experiment virtually remade in parts. Yeah. So spacesuited aliens. There's a famous shot of them walking through this, reflected in the sun. Yeah. There's a really good evocative sort of filmed shot of the astronauts, and that is the Quatermass Experiment. Yeah. Probably the movie more than the TV series this time.
I think it was Hammer that made the movie, was it?
Hammer did the remakes of all the Quatermass movies. And I love Quatermass. I think even Quatermass, the weakest Quatermass 2.
Did you see the live one they did with David Tennant?
I did, yeah, and I thought it was good. I thought the ending was a bit flawed. They went for a kind of a sort of Kate Bush video. so the original Quatermass ended with somebody's hand in a rubber glove pretending to be a monster taking over St Paul's Cathedral. Yeah. And I kind of quite like that idea.
Yeah.
That kind of, I can see
kind
why
of 50s B movie.
I can see why they have to resist doing that for
Yeah.
a live version done now, but it was done as a kind of a strange sort of spectral. I only saw it once. Strange sort of spectral ending, fading to white. This kind of weird kind of unreal ending. So it turned it sort of slightly symbolic rather than
Literal, yeah.
Alien taking over St Paul's Cathedral, which is fine. And I did think that the strength of it was mostly the fear you felt for the actors doing something live. Yeah. I mean, I love the idea of live television and these experiments with live television. I wonder if they should do it. They can't do it for Doctor Who, but they should do it for Doctor Who. But they can't do it for Doctor Who. But
maybe if there's like a two-hander or something like that.
If it was a two-hander, but it never works with modern Doctor Who. You can't have a small story anymore. You can't have an Edge of Destruction would have worked as it virtually was back then, but it would have worked as a live episode. Yeah. But you couldn't do an Edge of Destruction today, I think. Mm-hmm. Closest being probably the Doctor's Wife. Yeah. Could have been done as live pretty without special effects. Yeah. As a sort of streamlined version. Yeah. Yeah, I get that. So back with Quatermass. So season 7 relies heavily on Quatermass, but as do a lot of season 8 as well. Claws of Axos, the Demons. Yeah. The Demons is I particularly like the Demons. The Demons is
very evocative.
The Demons is another story that has completely nosedived in this strange collective consciousness of the fandom. I'm sure there's sort of key fans out there.
I haven't watched it for a long time, but I remember enjoying it as a kid.
I have a particular fondness for the Demons because I grew up about 20 minutes away from Oldbourne where they filmed it.
Oh, right, yeah.
And a mate and I used to look for Doctor Who locations. Yeah. And we used to travel around, and Oldbourne was the first. And Oldbourne is a weird place where you go and it's absolutely identical to you drive into the village and suddenly there's the church, there's the village green, and then the amazing thing is you walk up a path half a mile and you get to the barrows that they used. So normally these stories are shot. The barrows are normally sort of 40 miles away, but in this situation, the barrows are actually closer to the village green than they are in the actual story. Oh, wow. So it's almost like Oldbourne is almost like the Doctor Who theme park that we don't have. It's almost it's identical to how you saw it. It's got the pub still there, which does nice food. It's got the church. It's got the Long Barrows, which is a nice walk away. Yeah. So my mate and I, in a sort of overexcited way, we were virtually skipping up this path, going, "Oh my god!" And we found the Long Barrows by accident as well. We went up the path, thinking this looks like a likely path. I wonder what's up here. And then we suddenly found ourselves surrounded by these barrows, thinking, this looks a bit familiar. Oh my god! So that's kind of shaped how I feel about the Demons. This is one that we were talking earlier about how stories connect with your past. So you see a story when you're 12 or 8. And then you can go off it, but then you watch it again later on in life, and it reminds you of being 12 or 8. Yeah. The Demons happened in reverse. So I never saw the Demons originally. No. But I went to see where it was filmed, and so watching the Demons reminds me of something that's happened in my life. Yeah. It takes me back to this time when we used to drive around the south of England looking for these locations.
And also, I think for someone who's perhaps more used to New Who and is trying to explore the classic series, they may not necessarily look at something like the Demons or Earthshock, whatever, with quite the same affection that we might have watched it the first time.
Yeah, I think you have to. I mean, it almost becomes like archaeology now for some fans. And I don't know if I'm guilty or if I'm part of this. I suspect guilty. That you look on old stories, particularly with DVDs coming out, and you look on old stories as almost like artifacts rather than things to be enjoyed. So when the Crotons come out, which we discussed earlier as being probably not a story that I haven't managed to get through entirely, when the Crotons comes out, I will buy it and I will watch it.
Yeah.
Because of the academic side of my brain sees it as being an important part of season 6.
Yeah.
And you have to watch it to appreciate the development of Robert Holmes. Whether I'll enjoy it or not, I don't know. But I'll watch the special features. And some of these DVDs, I prefer the special features to the stories themselves.
I was just going to say that quite often. If it's one I know very well, the first thing I do is go straight into the special features.
Absolutely. And also, it's interesting with this is off topic again, but it's interesting with the DVDs. You also learn with the commentaries who's best at doing commentaries. Yeah. If you've got any 80s DVDs with Janet Fielding and Peter Davison and actually Matthew Waterhouse.
Yeah.
You know that the commentaries are going to be really fantastic. They're really cynical and they're really negative, and they don't.
He gets a bit of a ribbing from those two, doesn't he, Matt Waterhouse?
He does, but he kind of takes it out of himself as well.
I think he has to, really, doesn't he?
Which makes me like him. I want to get his book actually at some point.
Yeah, it's written in third person, isn't it?
It's written in third person.
That strikes me as strange.
It's strange, but everything. It's almost apt. It's almost like he's recognised that he's got this kind of perception in fandom, and maybe in the general public, but nobody will remember in the general public, but a perception in fandom of him being slightly odd and slightly sort of, the stories are all Tom Baker. Yeah. Tom Baker is rude to him, or the other actors don't like him, or he gets really upset at being killed off in the end.
Yeah.
And he's recognised this. He's picked up on this, and it's to his credit that he's trying to kind of take it out of himself, I think, and the commentaries help that.
Yeah.
I think I watched the Kinder commentary, and I like Kinder, but it's quite a dry story. I think I appreciate it more than love it. I think it's a really strong, intelligent story, but it doesn't have. I don't know. It doesn't have autons in it.
I forget the actor's name now. The guy who plays Hindle I think he's brilliant.
He's fantastic. Simon Rouse.
That's the one.
Oh, I just did it. I did a Toby Haydock.
Yeah.
Simon Rouse played Hindle, and he's fantastic when he goes potty.
Yeah.
And builds his.
He really goes for it.
He really goes for it.
Yeah.
And also Richard Todd.
Yes.
Is really good as well.
Who Matthew Waterhouse famously gave acting advice to.
Yeah, gave acting advice to, and for years. Fandoms used this as a kind of wasn't Matthew Waterhouse embarrassing, but actually Matthew Waterhouse in the commentary.
Yeah, didn't he say he was trying to have a bit of fun and have a joke with it?
Yeah, he doesn't deny doing it, and it's quite clear that the other actors are kind of like taking the piss.
Yeah,
but that's kind of a good thing because you get the impression. I mean, this is what colleagues should be like. They should feel free to rib other people. And I think this is what these 80s commentaries do.
Yeah.
The difficult commentaries to listen to are some ones with Tom Baker in it.
Tom is either very entertaining and very funny, or depending on his mood when he's in the studio doing the recording, he can be very well. I've said this before, I think on another podcast. It's almost like he's phoning it in. It's not really.
And the danger is he doesn't remember. Understandably, he doesn't
fair
remember.
enough. It's 40 odd years.
Yeah, and possibly with the 70s, the Pertwee ones as well. You end up with either people that have read up on the stories, so they've read, which is obvious when they have read up on it, so they can kind of repeat the anecdotes that we've kind of heard to death. The eye patch anecdote, which I probably don't do on the DVD of the Inferno, but there are certain anecdotes that they can repeat.
Yeah.
Or they just describe what's happening on screen and say, this holds up quite well.
Yeah.
And you kind of want somebody sardonic or slightly catty like Janet Fielding.
Yeah.
Even though I know it's been criticised for being overly negative, but negativity can be entertaining, I think.
In its own way, yeah.
And she's never kind of cruel about people like John Nathan Turner.
No.
She can be sort of mocking, but I think there's a fine line between mocking and cruel, or quite a broad line between mocking and cruel.
I quite enjoy it when they kind of go off on tangents and they just start. So they'll start reminiscing about something that happened on the set, and then they'll just start riffing on a totally different track.
Yeah. I mean, Janet Fielding is fantastic for talking about how television is made. She's got quite an interesting set of opinions on
Everything.
She talks about everything, but she also talks about sort of camera setups.
Yeah.
And the idea of, because the 80s Doctor Who is very much, television at that time was sort of 3 cameras pointing at actors. Actors had to stand in a horseshoe and react to have conversations in a horseshoe, which is unnatural.
Yeah.
And you also lose the sort of dynamic nature of it being on 3 cameras, so it's done as a play.
Yeah.
And she's very interesting in sort of dissecting that and analysing that within the stories she's talking about. She's not very positive about the stories she's in, but she's not very positive about her own performance in it.
I've seen 1 or 2 where she seems very obsessed about her hair.
Yeah. but normally you get Peter Davison sort of.
I like him a lot on those. I think
he's very good because he also mocks the other people doing the commentary.
Yeah.
And mocks himself as well. I mean, he was famously on a documentary once where he described everything as crap. I think there's an interview of him walking around Black Park where the Visitation is filmed, wearing sunglasses, and just everything is crap. It was in his sort of withdrawing from Doctor Who phase slightly. I
think they all go through it, don't they? They have to.
They have to go through it. And apart from Sylvester McCoy, he's unrelentingly cheerful about things. So yeah, that was digression. But season 7, how did we get there from season 7?
I'm not sure, but it's entertaining.
It doesn't matter.
So Ambassadors, I enjoyed it. I really liked it.
Ambassadors is good. You watched it on video, didn't you? Or
somebody had a sort of VHS copy they transferred off to DVD, which they lent me.
Entirely legally, I'm sure.
Entirely legally, of course,
sure,
yes. For purely for home viewing purposes.
But that means that you watched some of the episodes in black and white and some in colour.
Yeah.
How did you feel about the black and white episodes? Because I've got an opinion. It's a leading question. I've got an opinion about it. But.
I love early cinema. I like silent cinema, so black and white is no big deal for me at all.
Okay.
Obviously, it's a bit of a sort of fairly jarring switch from colour to black and white, but it doesn't really faze me.
I watched it, and I felt the same with Invasion of the Dinosaurs, and particularly with Mind of Evil. Have you seen Mind of Evil?
No.
Mind of Evil is another story where a lot of the colour episodes are lost, and I think it looks fantastic in black and white. I think black and white covers up. We were talking about the invasion looking quite good because black and white covers up the transition between BT and film, and it also, as you say, it not silent cinema so much, but 1950s, 40s, 50s film noir. And this has been overstated a little bit, but things like Mind of Evil and Ambassadors of Death, black and white gives it the quality and makes it seem more serious than it actually is.
I'd agree.
So scenes where the Doctor's going up in a rocket could be ridiculous, and probably is a little bit ridiculous. But in black and white, it actually increases the tension.
Gives it a bit of gravitas.
It gives it dark shades of darkness and light. And it also refers back to these 1950s episodes.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing about season 7 in general. Is it's unlike what you had before were threats from outer space. So the Mac Hulk thing of you're going to have to do alien invasions actually doesn't play out in season 7. That's what you get in Troughton. You get threats from outer space. Yeah. The invasion is the invasion from outer space. What season 7 does is it gives you a set of scenarios where the threat comes from within, from inside. So you've got a sequence of stories where, Spearhead from space, you have people in authority being taken over, and you've got Major Scobie, who's a sort of a military figure, being taken over. So the threat always seems to be slightly internal. In Doctor Who and the Silurians, again, the threat isn't necessarily the Silurians. The whole story idea is the threat is the human reaction to the Silurians. The threat is the
politics almost.
The misguided scientist, the mad scientific administrator, and the mad security guy, whose name escapes me. And they're the kind of the trio. They're the real cause of the threat of the story. And again, Ambassadors of Death, you've got Carrington, the whole story is based around. I don't want to do spoiler. It's dangerous doing spoilers, but I'm going to do it anyway. So the alien ambassadors turn out not to be malevolent. They turn out to be just trying to make friends. But every time they shake hands with somebody, they kill them because they're highly radioactive. And Carrington has had a previous encounter with them.
Yeah.
And is really sort of xenophobic.
Yeah.
So he's really against the sort of idea of Martians, and he's been turned mad by this.
Yeah.
So he's kind of gone a little crazy. So the threat comes from him. And again, Inferno, the threat comes entirely from within the planets. So we're not talking about aliens anymore.
Yeah.
We're talking about, I don't know, I guess the idea of primords. I guess the idea is the humans are regressing to an earlier state of evolution that never really existed. Where they looked a bit like dogs.
Yeah, like a missing link.
Yeah. But the other subplot is this fascist state. So it's saying this is what could have happened. This is what the human race could be like if it followed the path of unit in what is almost like the final warning concluding for season 7. If humans carry on being like this is what society is going to end up like. So if unit blows up any more Silurians, or if Carrington actually takes control, or if the Autons are successful. I mean, the Autons are an external force, but the threat is still this kind of this subtext of factories and kind of replication of sort of industrial replication, and also sort of the small-minded military idea.
I think that's also the start of something which I think they follow up on quite strongly. The whole environmental storytelling. Yeah, you've got the sort of manufacturing, the sort of filling the world with plastic.
Yeah.
You've got your Inferno where we're sort of drilling too far, potentially causing issues.
Sure.
And then later you come to things like the Green Death.
Yeah. So we're thinking about, basically it's a sort of a Malcolm Hulk.
Yeah.
And it's also a left wing thing. So Doctor Who swings very much in away from the right wing to the left wing, mainly based around the writers. We've got a liberal producer who's into transcendental meditation. He's into the Tibetan and Zen Buddhism. We've got a script editor whose only kind of liberal ideas are to do with female companions and how they need to be screamers. And then you've got his mates who are writers. So Robert Slocum. And Mac Hulk in particular is famously a communist writer with a really progressive idea about environmentalism. So from Mac Hulk we get Doctor Who and the Silurians, which hasn't got an environmental theme, but it does have this kind of natural environment, this kind of idea of a golden age, I think. And then you've got Invasion of the Dinosaurs and the Green Death, both of which do have an environmental subtext. So Doctor Who becomes a lot more politically minded, I think. And this is one of the things that we were talking about before the podcast started, was how I naturally, one of my natural tendencies is to try and argue against preconceptions. If anybody's got a preconception, even if it's left is right, or left is left and right is right, I try to argue against it. There are two preconceptions about the Pertwee era. The first is a Verity Lambert thing, which Verity Lambert wasn't so keen on Pertwee because she felt that he became too tied in with authority and authority figures. And he became what we'd call a clubbable figure. He became somebody who would go down to a London club with Tubby Rowlands. And to some extent, this is played an establishment figure. That's the word. And this is played out certainly in certain stories. But in season 7, I would suggest that he absolutely isn't this. He's an outsider who's come in, and all the threats, they're not just coming from within. They're not just coming from humans. They're coming from humans of authority. So Scobie, Carrington, Stallman, they're all kind of government scientists, administrators, officials. UNIT is the only real sort of piece of authority that the Doctor.
They have a lot of bureaucrats in that era of the show as well, don't they?
They have a lot of bureaucrats, and they're mostly sort of malevolent, or they're mostly, the Sea Devils, Claws of Axos, There's kind of overfed politicians.
Yeah.
So in many ways, a lot of Pertwee's stories are anti-authority, more anti-authority than a lot of Troughton and Pertwee Troughton and Hartnell stories. And Hartnell became quite an authority. I mean, he was sort of an authoritarian figure with a small a. And in the war machines, which I haven't seen a great deal of, but he's quite close with the authorities on Earth, I think. And also in his treatment of history, there's a kind of this is where it gets a little bit broader.
Yeah.
But his protection of the history of Earth is an example of his conservatism with a small c. He's very conservative about. I mean, the Aztecs, you can't change history, not one line. His desire to get off the planet when he's stuck with Marco Polo. All these historical stories are very much conservative in Hartnell. In Pertwee, you only get one historical story, which is the Time Warrior. And that's very liberal. It's very liberal with history. It's not history as we know it. It's a kind of a medieval play park history. It's Robert Holmes doing a history story he wants to write rather than being forced by Terence Dicks to do a straight historical. So Robert Holmes invents this new form of history, which is genre history.
You got the kind of pseudo-historicals, haven't you?
Yeah, fans would call it. It's easy to call it pseudo-historical, I think, but it's also the kind of historical that we see nowadays. So this kind of tying Agatha Christie. What would Agatha Christie be doing? She must be in a murder mystery. Celebrity historicals. Yeah. What would Dickens be doing? Well, he must be with ghosts. So we must have ghosts in this story. So it's kind of tying an historical event in with a piece of fiction relating to that historical event and seeing what happens. Yeah. But Hartnell didn't do that. So he's very much conservative. Authority figure, or the authority of the historian.
I also think that has a lot to do with the whole conception of the program, because initially it was designed to be almost like an educational program.
Yeah, it had a Arethian quality to entertain, but also to educate. Yeah. And Sidney Newman wanted particularly to avoid sort of too many aliens, because he wanted it to be an educative thing, but it's still educating children with the kind of the 1940s, 50s historical textbooks, marked over with great figures of history, kind of middle class British Aztecs fighting on the soundstage. So that's my argument with season 7 is actually, ironically, it doesn't play out into what Verity Lambert would suggest. So it's not the Doctor is an authority figure. He's actually working against authority, and his reaction to UNIT is very much a kind of, initially at least, he's very sort of tentative. He refuses to get paid. He's quite clear that he's developing the TARDIS so he can get off.
He just wants to get away.
He just wants to get away, and Liz Shaw, the development of Liz Shaw is almost part of this, I think, because Liz Shaw becomes more like a conventional companion. So she abandons the idea that she is the scientific advisor of the unit. And it's criticised that she abandons this by the end, and she just becomes a companion rather than an assistant. Yeah. But this is part of, I mean, the Doctor is the strong figure. He is the strong anti-authority figure. So that's a natural progression for her character to make.
I think she's very much she's on more of a level playing field as a companion to the Doctor, whereas I think a lot of the previous ones have been almost like sort of junior TARDIS team members.
Yeah, and in some ways that works. Although she does become a junior member at times, at convenient moments.
Oh yeah,
because that's what a companion's
there to do.
That's the Terence Dicks. A companion is there to scream.
But do you think that sort of laid the foundations for, well, maybe not for the next companion, but for like Sarah Jane Smith when they introduced her?
Sarah Jane Smith, and also Romana, and to a lesser extent, I mean, Nyssa, and even Ace as well. But also the more recent companions, Martha Jones, has very much a Liz Shaw about her. Yeah. Donna doesn't.
No. But that's part of the fun of that character, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it chops and changes, I think.
And I think you need that change as well, because it
Yes,
can get a bit staid otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm quite glad that the Ponds are going in a way, partly because my wife doesn't like them. And my wife has finally started liking Doctor Who, but she liked Rose Tyler and liked David Tennant, and she hasn't really been convinced by Matt Smith yet, despite the fact I tell her that it's really fantastic. But for some reason that doesn't work anymore. I told her that.
Seems like you're not the only contrarian.
Well, yeah, I know, but I think her problem is Karen Gillan, unfortunately, who I don't mind. I quite like. I'm going to get into trouble if I actually give an opinion. I like.
I like Karen Gillan, but I'm not necessarily such a fan of Amy Pond.
No, I think you can hear Stephen Moffat's voice through Amy Pond a bit too much, and sometimes Stephen Moffat's voice, when it becomes excitable, can become very Scottish. So I'm quite glad to see change. I quite like the change. But Liz Shaw was a strong companion. Yeah. And she was very well played as well, with what she had to deal with. I mean, she was underused, but every companion at that time was underused, I think. And she left. I mean, it's always been sort of the fan alleged that she was sacked, but she kind of quit before she could be sacked because she got pregnant. Yeah. So there was a kind of a mutual parting of the ways. And then Joe Grant came along, and Joe Grant is probably more classically a strong companion.
I think they had a real chemistry, the Third Doctor and Joe Grant.
Yeah,
which possibly didn't quite come across with.
And Jon Pertwee relies on chemistry, I think, because Jon Pertwee plays it very naturalistically, and he plays it as Jon Pertwee against all expectations. You were expecting Jon Pertwee to play it comedically, and I think even Jon Pertwee expected himself to play it comedically. But then, as soon as he starts filming, he's just thinking, "How am I going to play it?" I play it as myself. Yeah, and I think it works. I mean,
I think it's the most James Bond Doctor Who ever got.
The most, possibly the most Jason Keane.
Yeah.
But in some ways, you needed that. I mean, he develops a distinctive Doctor. You can't recreate what Troughton's done.
I love Patrick Troughton. I think he's fantastic, but it has to be said that the viewing figures were really dropping off.
Yeah, the viewing figures were dropping off. So the other thing about season 7 is it was done as a tester. They were on the verge of cancelling, but they didn't have anything to replace Doctor Who with. They asked Barry Letts, "What would you replace Doctor Who with?" And he couldn't think of anything. So they replaced it with Doctor Who, a new Doctor Who. Yeah. So if season 7 hadn't have been successful, if Pertwee hadn't have been successful,
that would have been it.
That would have been it, and there would have been no Doctor Who. There would have been probably no Doctor Who fans, because fandom really started with Pertwee. Yeah. There would have been, probably no Doctor Who videos. In fact, because in the 70s, so many of these series were trashed. Yeah. Nobody understood the value of it. No. Saint Ian Levine, I cut that. Ian Levine rescued in this golden period, rescued the Daleks from the skip. Yeah. He fought back people trying to destroy these tapes.
He does get a lot of stick in the world of fandom, but I think at his heart, I think he's a fan like us, and I think he just wants.
He's a fan like us, and all credit to him. Without him, we wouldn't be seeing a lot of what we saw. He was a fan. He was a powerful fan in the 1980s when Doctor Who needed a powerful, effectively rich fan with influence.
He spent a lot of his own money on. He's done. I don't know if it's ever going to see the light of day, but there's like an animated version of Sharda.
Yeah, I saw that on Twitter. And it would be interesting to see it. I know that J.R. Southall's seen it. Yes. And was very complimentary about it. Off topic, Sharda's an odd story that I can't quite decide. I've seen the video of it, and I don't know whether the video does it justice. But it's not the strongest story ever told, from what I saw.
I love Douglas Adams. I think he's a fantastic writer, but I don't know if his Doctor Who stories were his best work. I think City of Death for me is fantastic.
City of Death's fantastic. Pirate Planet's good in bits. It's not the strongest story, but it's fun.
It's a romp.
Yeah.
The captain I find very grating.
Yeah.
I have to say.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But Tom Baker actually comes out a little bit. Not comes out. Not comes out in the modern sense. But his acting, he actually recaptures some of his earlier seriousness in that. There are moments in that where I suddenly start to think Tom Baker's actually acting as the Doctor. He's actually getting his teeth into that.
Yeah.
Whereas the 1980 season, the first Jonathan Turner season, you get the impression Tom Baker's getting a bit bored, which actually makes the season a little bit, because he's subdued.
Yeah.
He's
very brooding,
morbid, and then he regenerates. So that kind of builds the season up to a particular point. But you're kind of watching it thinking, this is the end of Tom Baker. Wasn't he great in...
he's my Doctor.
Ark in Space.
Yeah.
Pyramids of Mars is one of my favourites. I really love Pyramid, even though episode 4 is basically a game of hopscotch. I still love Pyramids. But again, that's connected to my childhood. I grew up, oddly, about 20 minutes a game from Stargroves.
Oh, right.
And you can kind of wander around Stargroves.
Was that Mick Jagger's house?
That was Mick Jagger's house, where his mum was living. And you can still just sort of wander around the back of it and see the woodland.
Yeah.
And obviously the landscape, all of the 1970s, this is why I love 1970s Doctor Who. All of those episodes were produced along the corridor of the motorway as it goes out of London, so they could get to it easily. So Hampshire, Wiltshire, Berkshire, Oxfordshire, these are all sort of rich seams of locations from 1970s Doctor Who, and all the landscape I grew up in. I can see I've been to where they filmed Android Invasion, so I really like the filmed bit in Android Invasion, because I recognise the countryside, the demons, Pyramids of Mars, even something like the Awakening.
I'm sure anyone who lived in the south of England, anywhere near a quarry, would have probably seen a bit of Doctor Who filming going on.
Absolutely, yeah. Or a village. They heavily used villages, and I really love that, and I kind of miss that with the modern Who. I really like, but
they went back to it a bit on Series 5, didn't they? With Amy and Rory's home village.
With Ledworth.
Yeah.
But it's still obviously Wales, and Wales is the new south of England, which is completely understandable, but it doesn't quite connect with what I remember Doctor Who. See, it's almost like the X-Files being filmed around Vancouver, pretending to be different bits in America.
Well, they did it with the TV movie, didn't they?
They did it with the TV movie, so you get the United States of Vancouver, and San Francisco is Vancouver, and the forests around it, which made the X-Files, but and when they moved it to America, it didn't quite seem like the X-Files, because it wasn't like Vancouver. So that's my feeling of 70s Doctor Who. The other interesting thing about season 7 is the amount of times the Doctor changes out of his costume. I was thinking, if you watch it, in all the other Pertwee stories, he's got this sort of base level frilled shirt, cape. Yeah. But season 7, the Doctor stops being the Doctor for a lot of it. He doesn't wear this costume. Any opportunity to get into a t-shirt or an overall or a potholing suit, or a spacesuit, or a hospital gown, or completely naked in one notorious scene, then Jon Pertwee would do it. And I don't quite know what that says about it, but it really changes. I mean, the character of the Doctor changes in that season, and is unlike anything.
And Patrick Troughton was one for his disguises as well, wasn't he?
He's one for disguises, but these aren't disguises. These are sort of practical outfits. He's wearing Patrick Troughton. If he went potholing, he would go potholing dressed as Patrick Troughton. Yeah. If he goes to a cold place, he wears the big fur coat. But that's still a sort of Patrick Troughton. That's not a really practical thing.
I think it's on the info text on the Silurians. They were talking about there's a bit of a dispute between the wardrobe people and Caroline John because of the
Yeah.
potholing.
Yes.
She
didn't
felt
want to
she
wear
should be in
miniskirts,
a boiler suit like the others, and they
Yeah.
said no, you need to be in heels and a
Yes.
miniskirt, which
Yeah.
you can kind of see a point.
And she won with that?
Yes.
Didn't Pertwee step in or something and
Yes.
say,
Yes,
actually,
he did.
this is completely ridiculous. She should be wearing a boiler
Yeah.
suit because she's going potholing. So I wonder. I mean, there's a sort of practicality
Yeah.
around that season, which says this isn't Doctor Who as we know it, but it's also not Doctor Who as you remember it. If Tom Baker goes potholing,
Yeah.
which he effectively did in Revenge of the
Revenge,
Cybermen,
yeah.
he's dressed as Tom Baker.
In Wookiee Hole.
You can't imagine Tom Baker dressed
No.
I mean, he does he changes his outfit, but it's always a change of outfit. It's not a kind of a, it's not kind of a putting a t-shirt.
Not a practical move.
No, whereas that's something that Jon Pertwee sets into. He gives his Doctor this kind of that's the real Earthbound quality of the season, which is probably a conclusion. The real Earthbound quality of the season is how the Doctor changes, and that's how he changes over the season, and how Jon Pertwee plays the Doctor as being not so much an eccentric, but actually as Jon Pertwee, as a sort of human being.
And that really sets the tone a lot for the cast. I mean, Tom Baker, bless him, plays Tom Baker.
He plays Tom Baker, but Tom Baker had the saving grace of being a trained classical actor, and I think for an actor
and just ever so slightly bonkers as well.
And slightly bonkers, he does lose it when he gets self-indulgent, but he never becomes unbelievable. I think I've never seen every Tom Baker story you can watch because Tom Baker's in it.
Yeah, as a child, he's
Meg
just incredible.
Meg Loss is probably the best example of it. It's at a time when Tom Baker was at his most. He's starting to be a little bit morbid.
Yeah.
But you see him, you watch him playing Meglos, and you watch him playing the Doctor, and you realise how good an actor he is, because he's genuinely sinister playing Meglos. But he's the Doctor when he's playing the Doctor, and you can start to see that actually he is an actor.
Yeah.
He's not just Tom Baker playing Tom Baker. He's Baker playing the Doctor, but he's just forgotten sometimes what the distinction is between the two. And particularly now, he doesn't know what he's famously recently said he wasn't successful really after he left Doctor Who, because he was aware that people wanted him to play characters as the Doctor.
Yeah.
So he plays Macbeth on stage as the Doctor.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work with Macbeth, but that's what the audience wants to
Yes.
see. He plays Sherlock Holmes as the Doctor playing Sherlock Holmes. So he kind of loses his identity over the 7 years. But I think to play the Doctor, you need to be either a stage actor or theatrically trained, or you need to be a genuine eccentric. Tom Baker had both.
Yeah.
Jon Pertwee was a genuine eccentric, but had very little acting training.
Yeah.
Troughton was a stage actor, but probably I don't think was eccentric in his own life. He was a little bit reserved and private.
Yeah, I give you that.
And the same possibly with Hartnell, I think. I mean, he was a little bit racist.
Yes, that has gone on record.
Allegedly a little bit racist. So he's a bit of an eccentric, but he's of his time.
And he had his illness problems as well, which you can't really...
You can't,
No.
Peter Davison wasn't eccentric, but he was I think with Peter Davison it moved towards more of a sort of television actor phase, possibly. And now with David Tennant, again, classically trained. A little bit. I mean, he's a Doctor Who fan, so he's naturally an eccentric.
Yeah.
In the sense, what is a Doctor Who fan if not massively? I mean, we are, if we're being honest, sort of all weirdos, in a sense.
Yeah, to one degree or another. Yeah, I'll probably have to agree on that.
We're mostly very intelligent weirdos because Doctor Who, breeds. I mean, we're not Star Trek fans.
Oh,
Doctor Who breeds intelligence effectively because it's a literate series. It relies on reading. It relies on knowing things about Dickens and Shakespeare. There's a reason why so many fans are academics, and it's because we're really clever. We haven't necessarily been made clever by Doctor Who. We're attracted to Doctor Who because we recognise the clearness in the series. That's my excuse. Has always been. So David Tennant is naturally an eccentric because he's a Doctor Who fan, but he's also very clearly very intelligent.
Yes.
And Eccleston again is is theatrically trained. Matt Smith, who knows? I mean, he's a sort of a new, untried kind of fresh face.
Yeah.
But you'd assume he's going to go on to.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
If not film, then some major television roles, because he's
Yeah.
got the face of a television lead. He's got the face that you remember, I think. So yeah, I think that's what you need. And Pertwee wasn't classically trained, but Pertwee wisely chose not to act the part of Doctor Who. He chose to be the part of Doctor Who, and he chose to be himself in the part, which is why he relied so heavily on the relationship with his companions, both on and off screen.
Yeah.
The relationship with the unit, he relied on Nick Courtney being mates with him. He relied on the close-knit production team and the close-knit cast coming out on screen, and I think that's the attraction of the Pertwee era, and also its downfall ultimately, because there's only one way you can go with that, and that's the fracturing of this family. As soon as one person leaves or dies, Roger Delgado dies, Katie Manning leaves.
That was a huge blow, wasn't it, for Pertwee?
A huge blow for Pertwee. I can't remember which story they're filming when they find it out, but there's a sort of prurient interest in trying to sort of see if you can see the change in the way Pertwee treats the series. But that final Pertwee season, he's obviously his depression sort of comes across. It's like Baker's, but it's a much more personal thing with Pertwee. You can see that he's losing his family slowly, bit by bit, and he gets on with Liz Sladen, but it's not the same. It's never the same after Joe Grant and Roger Delgado leave the series, and then you start losing the unit stories. They start easing back from the unit stories. So I think that period of Doctor Who is very much tied in with how Tom Baker feels and how happy Tom Baker is. Yeah. Which is possibly why some people don't like that series. I mean, you're not a Pertwee fan. Is that fair to say?
I mean, there's things that I can watch a Doctor Who that I don't particularly care that much for. I can still find things to like in it.
Yeah, sure.
But if I had a choice of watching a Pertwee or Tom Baker, I'd watch a Tom Baker every time.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair, I think. I think in terms of consistency, that it's hard to beat. The first 3 Tom Baker seasons are the most amazing period of Doctor. I think the golden age of Doctor Who isn't the 1960s. There's the golden age of Daleks is the 1960s. The golden age of Doctor Who is from 1970 until about 1977. 1978. That's when you really hit a kind of consistency. You got the Barry Letts consistency, the Philip Hinchcliffe consistency, and that's when it was really
huge
at its most popular and at its most influential and at its most powerful. And it's only now we're starting to feel that consistency again. But we're all kind of too paranoid to appreciate it. To be honest, I mean, Doctor Who's massively successful, but
it's only looking back that you can.
Every news item, every forum online, Twitter is just a mess of people going, they're going to cancel it. They're going to cancel it when they've just delayed a series or they haven't filmed something. Oh my God, they're going to cancel it because we can remember the 1980s when they cancelled it, and we know what it felt like. And in the end, it wasn't a bad thing that they cancelled it. In a sense, it was getting good, but because now we're getting a resurgence. You have to have this reboot in place to make it good again.
It needed a rest,
and it will rest again, no doubt.
I'm sure.
But as Russell T Davies has been hinted, it's now because it's come back successfully. It's become like something like Sherlock Holmes. And you can't imagine them cancelling Sherlock Holmes.
No.
That whole concept just sort of doesn't work culturally or sort of mentally, because Sherlock Holmes
is part of the culture.
Sherlock Holmes is a myth. It's not an ongoing storyline. It's not a plot or a narrative. It's not a set of text. I mean, there's canon, but it's not a set of text. He's a myth. So there's always going to be either sort of low-key stories being written about him, like we had in the 90s for Doctor Who, or there's going to be Sherlock, big whiz-bang things, or there's going to be an American version of Sherlock, whiz-bang things, or there's going to be Robert Downey Jr. films. and those will fade away. But then in 10 years' time, there'll be another whiz-bangy film and another TV series, and it's constantly going to be reinterpreted. And that's what Doctor Who, because it's come back successfully, that's what Doctor Who's going to be.
Yeah.
It's going to be, you can't, the idea of them cancelling Doctor Who is almost unthinkable now, because the BBC will stop Doctor Who at some point.
Yeah.
But they'll remember, well, Russell T Davies brought it back, and it ended up with 12 million viewers watching Kylie Minogue saving Starship Titanic.
Yeah.
We can get there again if we just have the right author and the right amount of money and the right actor. We could get there again. Let's try again.
Yeah.
And they're never going to get to that stage where it might never come back again. So that's the kind of, and that's kind of almost what that 1970s series did. Yeah. Because it's laid the groundwork for Pertwee to recapture the viewers.
Yeah.
So by the time the Three Doctors or thereabouts or Day of the Daleks, you can't imagine them cancelling it.
No.
You can't. That doesn't happen, and it takes another 20 years, or no, not 20, but 10, 15 years before actually they do cancel it. But that's a slow kind of, during the 80s, it slowly kind of
died a death.
It died a death, but it kind of didn't keep up. I think that's the problem. It was done as a soap opera.
Consumed in its own continuity in a way that it just
possibly, yeah. But also, it just wasn't loved at the BBC. It just went through a phase of not being loved. And John Nathan Turner he wanted to leave.
Yeah.
He needed to leave, but they wouldn't let him leave because they couldn't find anybody to replace him.
Wasn't there a story, I forget which season it was now, where he had said, right, that's it, I'm leaving, I'm definitely going, and then with hardly any time left to go, they suddenly say, well, we haven't got anyone else, you're going to have to do the next series.
Well, I think that was most of the season. I think at the end of each season he'd say, that's it, I'm leaving, I can't do another season. And they make him an offer he can't refuse. And I mean, it's not, I don't think John Nathan Turner killed Doctor Who. The massive headlines, John Nathan Turner didn't kill Doctor Who. The length of time Doctor Who went along after Star Wars and before Star Trek The Next Generation, that's what killed Doctor Who. It was made as a soap opera at a time when people weren't making drama as soap operas anymore. It needed to have a break during the 90s so that people could remember how to make science fiction on television. It needed CGI to reach a certain level. It needed funding to build up. It needed the DVD sales to start taking off for people to suddenly realise, well, this is a really good cash cow in America or Canada, and co-fund it with Britain. So it was terrible at the time, and I was mortified when it went away. But we wouldn't have had the 1990s. Doctor Who in the 1990s?
No,
You're not a New Adventures fan?
I've read one or two of the books.
Okay.
I listened to the odd Big Finish. Not averse to that, but
I've sort of given up keeping up a little bit, because there's too much out there. I can't afford to buy Big Finish.
No.
I bought. You see behind you, I've kind of cherry picked. To the right, I've cherry picked what I've heard of the good Big Finish ones. Yeah. So some of the Rob Sherman, Joseph Lister ones, but I can't keep up with all the different Doctor Who's.
So much of it.
But I read a fair amount of New Adventures, but didn't really understand them at the time. So I've been trying to reread some of them. Yeah. And they were very influential. Some of them were very powerful. Human Nature. Is still being sort of in transit. The Ben Aronovich stuff, it's quite powerful. So the 90s was all right, but the Doctor Who magazine in the 1990s was one of the best TV tie-in magazines. Yeah, I mean, I think it hasn't gone downhill since, but it's trying to reach a younger audience. But in the 90s it was growing up with there were no new fans coming in, so Doctor Who fans were getting into their late teens, 20s.
So it's a case of that audience.
You had articles in the Doctor Who magazine about Roland Barthes, about structuralism, about people writing for the magazine were starting to do undergraduate English degrees. Just at the time I was doing my undergraduate English degree, and I was suddenly reading, it's like Harry Potter, I was reading the Doctor Who magazine that was sort of telling me about things in my life
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
So the Doctor Who magazine in the 1990s was really, really powerful. It's not so powerful for me now. It's more Ben Cook basically getting in with bastards. getting in with people. Well, kind of, but I just couldn't do what he does. But being unrelentingly positive about it, it's tied in so closely to the series. It has to be positive about everything. And in contrast, it has to be slightly negative about old Doctor Who as well, because that's all it can criticise. It can't criticise. I'm waiting for the article. Stephen Moffat's a bit better than Russell T Davies was about criticising his own stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm waiting for the interview with Russell T Davies where he finally tells us what he really thinks about how successful certain stories were.
Yeah.
Because there were good stories, but
Yeah.
there were stories that didn't work.
Yes.
And there were bad stories. There have been bad stories in the reboot. But it's almost like we're not allowed to think that there have been bad stories because we're being told that
everything's great.
I mean, admittedly, even the bad stories are better than...
Yeah.
There hasn't been a story of badness equivalent to some of the stories, or an uneven quality as to some of the stories before.
Yeah.
But you can't say that it's been a sort of an unbroken joyride through the grassy fields and sweet-smelling meadows of perfection. It's there have been mistakes they've made, I think.
Yeah. So in preparation for this, obviously, I'm guessing you've been watching some Doctor Who DVDs and genning up on it. I always ask this when we have guests on. Right? Is there anything else that you've enjoyed more recently? Doesn't necessarily have to be Doctor Who related, or
there is. In terms of Doctor Who, I haven't watched that much recently. I go through phases. I've decided to start an annual tradition of watching, because my wife's a Catholic, so she goes to midnight mass, and I don't. So I decided to start an annual tradition of watching a really good Doctor Who story on Christmas Eve, and I watched Pyramids of Mars for the first time, the way through.
Yeah.
And as I say, I watched the War Games, so I'm into sort of watching things that I watched too many times as a child. I got Pyramids of Mars, was the first video I got in 1988, and I watched it to death.
Yeah.
But rewatching it now after a break, I'm starting to see new things in it. And again with the War Games, I'm going to try Death to the Daleks again, because I watched that to death.
Oh yeah.
To death. Robots of Death.
Yeah.
To death. I watched that again. But I go through sort of phases of watching sort of cycles of 80s.
Yeah.
When I'm watching season 7, I tend to start with Seeds of Spearhead from Space, and I tend to then try and watch it all the way through. I get propelled to the next story, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Beyond Doctor Who, I've just watched Game of Thrones. I'm behind on Game of Thrones.
I haven't seen that yet, but everyone I know is raving about it on the internet.
It's very good. Unnecessary nudity. That's the only. I'm not a prude, but I didn't like Torchwood for the same reason.
Yeah,
why
like
put in swear words and nudity when all you're trying to do is just make it look adult?
Yeah.
It can be adult just through the complexity of the storyline or the sophistication of the storyline. You don't need swearing and nudity just to make it. Something like The Wire, you do need swearing because you're telling a story about a particular area. So you're telling us if you have drug dealers going, gosh,
wouldn't have quite the same ring to it.
Would you like to buy some drugs? It wouldn't quite work, so you have to have the swearing.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones, it's a fantasy. I mean, the swearing I don't mind, but the nudity, it's just. I mean, the nudity I don't mind. It's very pleasant at times. I mean, I'm not complaining, but I just thought it was distracting from the story. But it is very good. What else have I been watching? The usual things. I really liked Stephen Moffat's Jekyll. I've watched that, rewatched that recently, and Sherlock, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost you're almost duty bound as a Doctor Who fan to also be a fan of Sherlock.
Yeah, I love that.
It's a really good time to be a Doctor Who fan because everybody's a Doctor Who fan.
Yeah, that's great.
At the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I recently went down to Plymouth to see. They were doing a tour, and it's the original radio cast of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Okay, yeah, I saw that.
Doing a live show, and it's amazing.
Is that good?
Really good, yeah.
Right.
Great fun.
Okay, I reread Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in the book, and I did prefer it I didn't used to like it. Douglas Adams, I've always been a fan of the idea of Douglas Adams, but I love Dirk Gently as a novel, and I love Long Dark Tea Time with the Soul.
Yeah. Sadly, Dirk Gently's been cancelled, hasn't it?
Dirk Gently's been cancelled, which is sad. I think if they'd made a second series, they would have made it stronger. I think they were developing it as they went along.
Yeah.
I don't think it ever quite found its feet. I can see why it's cancelled, because they're not making drama anymore for BBC 4. But I can see why it was cancelled. It hadn't quite got there.
It wasn't a mainstream programme, but I think there were a lot of people who liked it.
There were a lot of people, yeah. It wasn't mainstream.
A vocal minority, shall we say.
But I can't see... It didn't have a consistency, so I can see how you liked one episode, but then the next episode was completely different. Yeah. So to say I really liked the series is an unusual thing for me to think about. And I think if they'd have gone on, it had a real potential to be more consistent. Yeah. And then it was a sort of small time eccentric series. Yeah. Which we really need. We actually need. I mean, being human, I've lost interest in slightly. But it had that kind of small time eccentricity to start with, which Doctor Who doesn't have anymore. That's what we're missing in Doctor Who. But we've got in other series, we've got these extra BBC channels where they're making stuff that Doctor Who used to feel a bit like. Yeah. And also the Fades as well, which they cancelled after the series, which I didn't really get into, but I could see. I'm now starting to watch the first episodes of things, and I think that's got potential, and I just don't watch the rest of them. So I can there's too much. There's not enough time in the day to sort of keep up with these different things. But a lot coming from America as well, and HBO. Yeah. Really powerful stuff coming from HBO. And Showtime as well. Homeland I really liked. So there's lots of stuff out there. It's quite a good time for television, I think. If they can survive the funding cuts. Yeah. But we'll see. There we go.
Well, thank you ever so much for coming on the show.
That's all right. That's okay.
It's been a real pleasure.
That's no problem.
And if it hasn't been too much of a traumatic experience, you may possibly have you back again sometime.
Yes, no, it's been good fun. I don't often get to talk about Doctor Who in such a huge, complex amount, because normally it's my mate and I, and we just get into arguments about, just things, and we don't talk to one another for hours on end. So it's been quite interesting.
So that wraps up another show. Thanks again to Matt for appearing on the programme. And if you want to hear a bit more Doctor Who based chat, then you can check out the Blue Box podcast, which is available through iTunes and also starburstmagazine.com. So until next time, thanks for listening.